From the arena to the front office, this is Scoreboard. I'm Chris Titley, and each episode brings you stories from the game of sport, where mindset, money, and meaning shape what comes next. Athletes, coaches, owners, and business leaders unpack the moments that matter, because the scoreboard isn't just about winning, it's about life beyond the game. Now let's get to this week's episode. Hi, it's Chris Titley here, and on today's episode of Scoreboard, the podcast, I'm joined by Mel Jones. Mel, thank you so much for being part of this series.
Absolute pleasure, Chris. I've seen you have got a few cricketers on your bandwagon already, so lovely to join them and the rest.
Yes, excellent. Mel, we're sitting here on the 7th of May, a beautiful, fine Brisbane day here as well. What have you been up to in the last couple of days?
Oh, it's been hectic actually. Been trip to Canberra yesterday with a business colleague, chatting to the Indian High Commissioner about all things cricket and sports diplomacy, which is quite good. Chatted to DFAT about the Afghan women's cricket team. Lots of chats still around that and the sort of the build of their high performance program, and about to actually have a chat with Craig Morris, who's with the US Tennis Association, an Aussie from Melbourne, chatting about a new business build that we're doing, taking women to New York in August. So women are working in the business of sport. So lots in between, trying to get ready for Sky Sport in a month's time.
Yeah, no, wow. I just want to touch on the Afghan cricket team for a bit. I'd love the listeners out there to tell a bit of a story about that the background in 2021, I believe it was.
Yeah. So I think most people sort of remember the footage that they saw on the news when the Taliban took over, and the chaotic and quite traumatic scenes at the airport with people trying to leave Afghanistan. I was actually in quarantine at the time, coming back from the UK from a stint with Sky Sport over there, and had a message from Shada Ugra, who's a brilliant Indian cricket journalist, and she had a connection with one of the Afghan girls. And she just messaged me and she said, "Do you know any of them? Would you mind just sort of reaching out just to see how they are?" And I said, "Oh, look, no problems whatsoever." And long story short, voice message to Benafsha saying, "I work in cricket. I don't know if you know who I am, but, all these sorts of things." I said, "Do you need any help? You or the players, do you want to try and get out?" Because we'd already had the Afghan women's football team land in Melbourne. And I knew some of the women that were involved in that process. And Little B, as we call her, she said, "Yeah, I do, the players do." So we had 19 contracted players all of a sudden in a big WhatsApp group trying to figure out how we get humanitarian visas, how we get them, not just the visas, but then the process of getting them across to the Pakistan border through multiple checkpoints. Had a wonderful team of Emma Staples, who's been a great mate of mine for many a year, Dr. Catherine Ordway, who was at Canberra University. And so the three of us just sort of buckled down and tried to figure out the world of visas and governments and all this sort of side of things. So in the end, it was 130 plus players, administrators and family members that we got out to Australia.
Wow. I think I was reading some articles saying it was sort of a bit like a Bourne movie, like it was the checkpoints and obviously people were fearing for their safety, but now they're residing, the 130 are residing in Australia at this stage. Is that right?
Yeah, it is. And, you don't want to make light of it, sort of the process at the time, but my Fox Sports producer, Kate Carr, was just sort of sitting there. We're in the control room during a game, and I'm commentating 30-minute stints, and in between that I've got a player sort of dropping pins saying, "I'm here, where's the driver?" because she'd crossed illegally at the time. And so that part certainly felt like you're smack bang in the middle of something just so fanciful, like nothing that you'd ever think that you'd be ever involved in. But I think what you certainly realise, I absolutely love the sport of cricket. I love the community side of cricket, and that's where you're in a fantastic sport, because it was all those people from community club cricket and land sort of just reaching out, helping settle these players into clubland and cricket, and sort of just opening up their arms and wrapping them around them in a pretty traumatic time was something pretty special to see.
Yeah, the power of sport and the power of cricket, not just around the sport but also around life. I'm curious to know your interest in cricket, when it began. Is there a particular memory?
Typical Aussie kid. So my mum comes from a small country town called Rutherglen in Victoria, up near the Murray River. wine region. Probably a few people are thinking, why do I know that? So if they like your fortified wines, your ports and tokais and things like that.
Some people remember racetracks as well for
yeah,
regional
that's
areas.
it. So Mum grew up there. My nan and Pa built their family home back in, I think it was 1936 kind of thing. So it was always Christmas holidays and family holidays up there. I had 6 male cousins, so it was backyard cricket right throughout the summer. My dad's from Trinidad in the West Indies, and he, although growing up in Trinidad, spent the majority of his life in London, but knew a lot of the West Indian cricketers. So when they toured here throughout the halcyon days, Dad would always sort of send Wisden Cricket magazine signed by Malcolm Marshall, who was a good mate of his, get me tickets to the game. So I think it was sort of the combination of just childhood sport and play outside, whether it's schoolyard or beach or backyard, and then sort of knowing and having connection with the West Indian men's cricket team and sort of identifying with them a lot more than probably with the Australian men's team as a kid. So it was sort of the combination of the two.
I'm also curious to know, you retired in 2005, so it's 20 years ago, but growing up then, what was your pathway like to become a player that represented your country?
Oh, look, completely different to today. Young girls and boys, watch the WBBL on TV and watch the Australian women's cricket team doing their amazing feats. And so, there's an Australian women's cricket team to aspire to. Whereas, I was aspiring to kicking Alan Border out of the middle order of the Australian men's team because I just had no idea there was an Aussie women's team.
A thing, yeah.
Yeah, so it was. I was very fortunate in the 2 schools that I went to. I had teachers there that were really supportive of a young girl playing with the boys. So Middle Park Primary School was fantastic, and then went to Elwood High in Melbourne. And my geography teacher loved his cricket. He was an English guy, and got a girls' cricket team together. Got us involved in local clubs. John Hanscom was his name, and if the name rings a bell, it is a connection. It's Pete Hanscom's dad. So yeah, he was pivotal in terms of getting me involved in club cricket, and then sort of once you're in the system, then you sort of have a better idea that eventually there is an Australian women's cricket team. Wouldn't mind trying out for them one day, and it sort of went that way.
Do you remember when Peter was born?
Pete was late in life for John. So I'd already sort of left high school and the like, but going full circle, I ended up working at it was called Elite Sports Properties back in the day. It's now TGI, for Australia's largest sports management company, and I was working there managing female athletes. Full circle, Pete Hanscom was actually managed by the crew that I was working with. So caught up with John, sort of as Pete was coming through as well.
Yeah, excellent. The ideation of playing for Australia as a young child there, and as you probably played with the boys all the way through, was there a point there where you're like, actually, I'm pretty good. This is good. I like this.
I knew I liked it. I knew I was okay at it. It's still always the complete shock when you get selected. We were playing a state final, actually, Vic, New South Wales at the SCG, and it was the final presentation of the. We'd lost to New South Wales again, and I remember getting into the pavilion and. Deprived childhood. I'd never had a prawn cocktail. They had those on the bench, and I'm like, oh, this is great. We've lost, but I'm having a prawn. And I was way at the back of the room as they were announcing the Australian team, and I just didn't even think I had a shot at all. I was cheering on the rest of the players. I thought, this is great.
You had a mouthful of prawn cocktails.
Yeah, completely missed my name. They're like, you got picked. I'm like, don't be stupid.
And then to represent your country that moment, you remember the first game?
First game, I do, not for great reasons. We were actually playing, it was one of the first tours that the Pakistan women's cricket team had overseas. And they had what a journey they had just to get to playing cricket. They a lot of them had to say that they were leaving, going on holidays, and they weren't actually, they all had to leave in separate groups to come out and play. So they were playing underneath the Pakistan Women's Cricket Association. Back then they weren't with the PCB. And it was just a completely different world. We were playing in Melbourne, playing at a school. It wasn't even at a major cricket ground. It was at Waverley. It was 43 degrees. The Pakistan team were in the middle of Ramadan, so they had all their challenges themselves. We'd piled on runs. Lisa Titley and Belinda Clark, no surprise there, piled on hundreds of runs. And I went out to the middle with about 2 overs to go and was just sort of hit and giggle. And I think it was the only catch they took that day. So
right. Well, at least you gave them a positive, right? A positive figure. We got one. Huh? And growing up in that era of women's cricket, those golden names that you mentioned, yourself and Belinda Clark, etc., and sitting here in 2025, you're proud of what you guys did in that era, and where can women's cricket go from now?
Yeah. Oh, look, immensely proud. It was a professional team without being professionals, if you know what I mean. Not paid, never got paid to play right throughout my career, but the way particularly in which Belinda Clark led the side as a leader was phenomenal. And I think the pride also comes from, you win World Cups and Ashes, and you hope to sort of inspire the next sort of generation coming through. But the pride comes through two things. I think one, making sure that there's still a connection to the past players, and I think we were really strong on that. And hopefully, I can certainly see that still front and centre of the minds of the current Australian players as well. And I think the other pride is that you sort of look at that team that I was involved in, and so many of these players have played pivotal roles in cricket since. So Chris Matthews was our manager back then, so she's gone on to be CEO of the WACA and is now president of the Players Association. Belinda Clark, all her work at Cricket Australia now with the Leadership Playground, her own business there. Lisa Kitely's coached Australia and England. Julia Price has coached Hobart Hurricanes, and the USA Cricket is doing phenomenal development work around the world. She's currently in Brazil, developing the game there for women. Shelley Nitschke, current Australian coach. So that's the other part of it, is that they haven't just played the game and then, we're all had our full-time jobs and gone off in our own way, but I think we're still so well connected to the game and hopefully making a difference there as well.
Absolutely. A blast from the past there, Julia Price. She was, I was a very amateur wicketkeeper in lower grades of Brisbane during the late 90s, early 2000s. But Julia was one of my coaches at a cricket camp when I was about 13 or 14 as a wicketkeeper.
Oh, wow.
And it was like one of these moments where I'm like, Julia Price. And then we just got on really well at the time. And I was like, I love wicketkeeping. And she made it fun. Right?
Yeah. She makes a lot of things fun.
Always this big radiant smile on her face. It was a lovely person. Great to hear that she's still involved with the game. And just on that, as you were playing for Australia, etc., was there, you said you weren't getting paid. What was in the back of your mind going, can I keep doing this forever, or what am I doing,
Yeah, look, and for me at that time, I was I'd come home to Australia over the summer. I'd work with Stephen Field, who's been a great mate for a very long time. He was a regional cricket manager for Cricket Victoria, and I'd go out and we'd do development work from Mildura to Warrnambool and all over the Brokenville, all over the place. So I'd sort of be doing bits and bobs over the Aussie summer. I then, over the winter, would travel overseas. I worked in South Africa and Surrey Cricket, county cricket, working in game development over the winter time. So it was sort of bits and pieces for me at that stage. At the back end of my career, I sort of delayed I was a teaching degree through human movement and then a grad dip in teaching. So I got into PE teaching a little bit at the back end. But most of what I tried to do was allow myself the chance to, live and get money in to survive and train, but also hopefully have still that touch point with cricket that would, allow me the opportunity of sort of delving into work post playing days as well.
And as a batter during your career, what attracted you to being a batter as opposed to a bowler or something else? What is it that you loved about it?
Well, actually, I started off as a bowler. So Australian youth teams, I'll say I was the opening quick, but there's no footage, so the pace might not. No one can really deny the pace of it all.
Opening quick. Just keep running with that. Yep.
I'm going to run with that. And then I had some back issues, and in the sort of time I was sort of recovering from that, just spent more and more time with bat in hand at training and things like that. So I was probably always going to be a better batter than I was a bowler. And I think for batting, it's that nervousness, I think, around the fact that you really only get that one chance. Yeah, you can get dropped or not edge one, not get given by the umpire, but so you're always on edge a little bit. And I think I quite liked and enjoyed that element of it. And I think there's a creating your own style to batting as well. You know, we've seen some. We're very fortunate in Australia across the men's and the women's game to see so many, world class batters, but they've all got their own unique style about their game. And I go back to playing my grandparents' backyard. We had this. I should find out what the name of the plant or the bush is, but it was really spiky. So if you cover drove it into that,
was the bougainvillea? No.
No.
I had that in my backyard cricket days. You had to get the ball. You had to go. Ow,
This is it. So you can just keep running all the time. And whereas Nan's chook shed was on the hook shot, and as most people know, I was horrendous on it. So because you didn't want to hit Nan's chook, so you create your own style. Susie Bates is like that. She's wonderful on the cut shot, and that's because there was a gap in her backyard and was hitting away from the windows. And so you create your own style with it as well.
And Mel, when it came to batting, what did you think that you had that others didn't, and why were you selected, and why do you think you got centuries, and why do you think you were good at batting?
Oh, dude, I've never been asked that question in that way before. I think for my batting style, I always tried to make it as much of a partnership as I possibly could, because I think hopefully it helped me get through, tricky times, but also my partner up the other end as well. And I think that takes away a little bit of the, this bowler's got it over me kind of thing, because you're out at the moment, you're thinking process a little bit more than, the result kind of thing. So I certainly enjoyed that element of it. I'm the kind of person, you like to find a way through tricky situations, so that the harder it is, you like to try and figure out the best way to try and navigate that. And it's just that one-on-one nature, isn't it? That when you've got someone at the top of the mark, trying to stare you down, and you trying to protect your wicket and score runs, there's an element of that sort of, cricket's a fantastic team sport, but it's probably the most individual team sport you're ever going to come across. So you sort of had both of those wonderful elements in the one spot.
Yeah, it's a bit like life, isn't it? Batting, I suppose. You got the challenges and you got the competitiveness. The other thing I was thinking about, were you patient?
Probably not. At times, in and out. I think that's probably one of the things you work through as an athlete, isn't it? That you can be a little bit impulsive at times. And that was, I think, the joy of cricket too, is that when you're playing the sport on turf wickets and around the world, you have to navigate all those changing conditions. So you can't just go in and go, well, I scored 100 last week in Melbourne, so I'm going to go up to Brizzy, be batting early at Allan Border Field and do exactly the same way, can you? It's impossible to do that kind of thing. So, patience came through getting out cheaply, I think.
Did you count your score? Were you one of those people?
No, not at all. I was a live the moment kind of person, which rightly or wrongly might have negated a few extra runs, but no, I wasn't a counter.
And so then when you got a century on debut, did you know that you're getting close?
I didn't really know I was getting close. We were at Guildford, and I'd love to say it was a sticky wicket and a seamer.
Oh, it was so hard. It was the toughest wicket anyone could ever play. I think 100 was worth 300.
Yeah. It was like batting on the M25, really. It was an absolute road. I can remember I remember getting into the 90s, and this is going to sound exceptionally weird for people to sort of think about, but I'd gotten picked for Australia without scoring a century ever, even at club cricket. And I can remember looking at the scoreboard going, I'm in the 90s, and I'm like, I've never been here before. It was like one of those sort of, light bulb moments. And then I can remember nailing the ball beautifully, but I just kept picking the fielders. And I can remember, we're going to go back to Julia Price here, because it took me a couple of overs, and she was running out. This is how old I am. It was film. So she was winding on, trying to get the moment, and she ran out of film. She's almost abusing me from the pavilion going,
slow it down. Oh, yes, those days of film. I remember.
Yeah.
I went travelling in 2003, and there was no digital cameras, and we had to do we're at the the Leaning Tower of Pisa, and you're doing the trying to get it, but you go, well, I don't know if that was right. I don't know. And you had like 15, and then you go to the shop and you get a thing, and you're like, we got that. Oh, we got it. I missed it. Whatever. It's like 10 we missed, but we got one. We are showing our age. This the modern day cricket as a batter. How would you go? What's the? I mean, you've got 3 different types of games, or maybe even more now. With the reduced game in the 100 in England, you've got different types of games. How do you go as a batter? What advice do you give to young batters now?
Yeah. Advice to young batters. I think there's always a foundation to cricket. You've always got to have, and I'm not going to go way back to, got to have a solid defence. But you've got to know how to defend you, and that looks so different to batters. I'm not saying it has to be absolutely perfect, but you've got to know how to give yourself the best chance of scoring runs, and to do that, you've got to have a defence that works well for you. So, some people, you look at Ben Duckett, like his leave percentage is 2%, which is absolutely ridiculous in Test match cricket. So his defence is still playing the ball. Now, some people would say, well, you're giving yourself more of a chance of going out, but for him, it works, kind of thing. So, for young cricketers, I say just get in the nets and play. Like, create just different scenarios for yourself. Have someone bowl to you or throw to you, and just, I can have to hit, if you're in those sort of old metal nets, each of the posts, they're my run scoring, and then change it around saying I have to avoid the posts of the fielders. Try and figure out ways in which you can develop your game to score runs, but also protect yourself and give yourself the longest time to score. And I think for the changes in games from Test to T20, your style of cricket will flourish in each element just with a little bit of extra time, kind of thing. I think that's
you don't think they're sort of merging a little bit?
I think it depends on the person and maybe on the team and the cycle that they're going through a little bit. You sort of look at England and their aggressive approach over the last couple of years, and they bring in, I just mentioned, a Ben Duckett like player and those sorts of things. But you still look at Harry Brook, and he can play long innings. And he can play magnificent T20 innings. So I think they're the better players, aren't they? The players that can figure that out.
Now, you've already rolled off a couple of stats, and you're a commentator, and you obviously analysed the game. Back in your day, there was none of that. How do you find the stats now and the numbers and the overload, I suppose?
Yeah, I think there needs to be a balance in it. And I'm the kind of commentator, like you get provided stats and you go do your own research as well. I like it to be relevant to the conversation you're having and not be over the top. You're really mindful that you're talking to such a broad range of people. So some people absolutely love it, and you also decide on who you're commentating with. So if I'm commentating with Katie Martin and Julia Price, both of those are players that, like, Katie Martin loves her Hawkeye. Julia Price is really analytical on technique, so you can almost leave that to them to sort of flourish in that position. But if you're with more storytellers, you then sort of can delve into the stats and sort of bring that through a little bit.
And Mel, where did the interest come from in being a commentator?
That was, I need to give a shout out to Mark Jennings, former Australian captain, who was a selector of the Aussie team at the time, and she dropped me. And so I was actually in England working the Surrey cricket when the Aussie girls were over for an Ashes tour. And it was just when Sky Sport and the ECB had a contractual deal with their broadcast rights to ensure that they televised at least a minimum of one women's international per season. And I was over there. They needed an Aussie voice. They asked if I'd be interested. I said no. I said, why would I want to commentate on a game that I want to be playing in? It sounds horrendous. And they said, it's £300. And I said, tell me where, when, and what to wear. And I thought, I'm getting paid more than every single player out there on the field, so at least I've got one up on them for this day. Got in the commentary box with the likes of Gower and Botham, Paul Allett, Graham Fowler, and there was someone else in there, Bob Willis, for the game.
There you go. And the first sort of iteration of your commentary, have you looked back on it? Was it okay?
Horrendous. I've actually sound like I've sucked in a couple of balloons of helium. I was really surprised. Sky actually sent it through to me recently for a talk that I was doing, and I mean I'm no good, as we all are. We hate listening to our own voices. But this was just horrendous. I don't know what's happened over the years, but yeah, I'm thankfully I've sort of got rid of that.
And what's the key to being a good commentator, do you believe?
I think first and foremost, you got to be yourself. It's got to be genuine. You've got to play to your own strengths. As soon as you start sort of wavering from that, trying to be someone else or, stretch yourself into spaces. I mean, you stretch yourself, but try not to mimic other people. It becomes disingenuous, I think. So first and foremost, you've got to be you. And I think that's one of the beautiful things about sort of jumping into a commentary box is that there are so many different characters and personalities, which is a lovely mix, I think, and not the same. The worst thing is having 3 people on comms or 2 people on comms who are exactly the same. It gets a bit, for me anyways, a bit monotone and boring kind of thing. So yeah, you got to be yourself. You got to be prepared. You got to do your prep and your work. Yes, former players know the game and they can sort of lean into that. But there are so many other parts of the game that you need to. If there's a rain delay, you've got to have the ability to bounce in and out and off topics pretty quickly. You've got to stay up to date with world news and cricket and sport and all those sorts of things. And I think the other part is the most important bit is the person who's listening. You've got an element of educating them and entertaining them and keeping them engaged and not treating them like they don't know the game, but if they don't know the game, giving them enough information that doesn't sort of
bombard
overwhelm them as well.
Yeah. You're speaking of rain delays, there was a particular rain delay event one time. There was a few kids playing cricket and you got yourself involved. Do you want to talk about that?
Oh, Canberra, yeah. Yeah, Ashes in Canberra a few years ago. And funnily enough, I think about it and I go, why did I do it? Because that's part of I'm a big person on backyard cricket and just the play element of sport. And here are these kids playing a little bit of makeshift cricket on the concourse with a empty, bottle of water and makeshift stumps. And we had a bat, a Fox Sports sort of prop cricket bat in the commentary room. So I ran it down for them, which they absolutely loved. But it sort of took away from the ability for them just to sort of make up their own game. But I think they were pretty happy to.
They were certainly very happy. I think there's a few balls bowled after that, and they'll maybe a couple of
still
drop catches.
Yeah,
one hand, one bounce. All the rules of the backyard cricket. Mel, I'm going to ask you about sport. Your favourite all-time sporting moment.
Yeah, asking someone who's been involved in and watched a lot of sport. So that's a pretty tricky one. Giving myself a little bit of time to prepare here. I think and I'm going to say these and then I'm going to get off the call with you and then I'll be like, why didn't I say that one? I think as a fan, being at the Wimbledon final to see Ash Barty win Wimbledon.
Yes, that's the first one we've had of that, which is great. Yes.
Yeah, so that was special on so many accounts, on so many reasons. You had the whole history of Yvonne Goolagong and Ash and, her first Wimbledon and she, won Paris and then she went on to win the Oz Open after that. But I got there and I was sitting there in my always was, always will be T-shirt, which she spotted as soon as she came onto the court, but I didn't think she saw me. And then once she got was presented with the trophy and she was walking off, she pointed right at me as if to say, "G'day, I see you there," kind of thing, and I just melted. It was just
that's so good.
So as a fan, it's probably that one. As a work sporting event, it was the T20 final at the MCG when the Aussie women defeated India in front of 86,000+ people. And there's a moment where 1988, I watched the Aussie women under Lynn Larson defeat England at that same ground, and I think there was 2,000 people there, kind of thing. So you can sort of see how the sport's changed and people are embracing it, and seeing world's best athletes being paid and broadcast and all those sorts of things. That was phenomenal. And then as a player, this is going to sound weird too, having won a couple of World Cups and the like, my club side, EMP, when we won our first premiership, and there was a gap of 18 years. To sort of coach them and play in that side and just the club just went absolutely ballistic. You know, it was so much joy to so many people. It was pretty special.
That reminds me of growing up in Queensland when I was 13 when we won the Sheffield Shield final after 69 years. It was just this sort of the longevity between gaps and that makes it all worthwhile and the rest is history. Mel, I ask this for most of my guests. It's a scoreboard moment. And the moment is almost like a Kodak moment. It's a picture in your life or something in your life which you thought, this is so memorable, but it sort of changed the course and changed the direction of your life. What's your scoreboard moment?
Changed the direction of my life? Well, funnily enough, I've probably already spoken about it. I think getting dropped and then having that opportunity to commentate. Like if I'd played in that series, I probably would never have commentated. Like that would have been, I would have gone on, I would have kept coaching probably was always my passion and want to get into post-playing career. So I would have gone down a completely different path.
And kids these days specialisation is happening a lot more in terms of sports and direction and pathways and rep teams, etc. And kids are playing at 12 and maybe only playing one sport to kind of go through there. What's your advice nowadays to a modern, a 20, 25-year-old kid who was a Mel Jones growing up, inquisitive about wanting to play and have fun in cricket? Some advice now?
Don't pigeonhole yourself too soon. There's the game and you yourself develops and changes so quickly. So play other sports, be curious about other things in life, and because all that plays into, fingers crossed, if you're all going well, your ability to become a well-rounded cricketer. And so it's not purely about a skill set of, hitting ball, bowling ball, catching ball kind of thing. You need to have that game sense, tactical awareness. You get that from so many other sports, from watching sports, from talking about sports. You become a problem solver. You find plan B, C, D, however many you sort of need, and you need outlets. You need real balanced kind of approach to life. So don't pigeonhole yourself too soon and get in a bubble. Keep things as broad as you can.
And if we repeat this podcast in 5 years' time, let's call it around number 2030, where would you like to see the game of cricket from both a men's and women's point of view be?
I would love to see us sort out our scheduling problem, which is, I think, we're eating ourselves beautifully in the sport of cricket at the moment. You want relevance, you want your best players in, the best competitions so that, people can be thrilled and say, I was there when, and we don't sort of just have game after game after game where, they just sort of roll into one and there's sort of no relevance to it all. I would love for the women's game to have a situation where World Cups are, 16 teams and we're not just sort of relying on the same couple of teams at the top of the order. So there's development work sort of to be done around the world as well. So still lots to be done, but at the same time we're still playing a fantastic sport that's providing a lot of enjoyment and fun and careers for a lot of people.
Mel Jones, thank you so much for being on Scoreboard, the podcast today, and sharing your life journey and some insights into the game of cricket, the game of sport, and all the different things that come with it and the importance of it, not just on the field but also off the field. I wish you the very best on the upcoming tour of the UK and Sky, etc., in the next phase of your life, and looking forward to following your progress.
Oh, thanks so much, Chris. I'm off to ring Julia Price now to find out just how good a wicketkeeper you were.
2 out of 10. All right. Thanks, Mel.
There we are.